In April 1973, days of heavy rains caused flooding in Barton County, Kansas. The banks along Walnut Creek eroded and were swept away by the fast-moving water. As the storm passed, a grim discovery was made along Walnut Creek. The erosion had exposed 10 skeletons buried in 2 graves. At first, it was thought that these were recent and a killer might be at large, but after a preliminary investigation, it was determined that the bones were old. Further historical research and archaeology revealed that these skeletons belonged to the 10 teamsters killed in the Walnut Creek Massacre of 1864. In that massacre, Kiowa warriors swept down on teamsters hauling flour to Fort Union in New Mexico Territory. The attack occurred just a few miles from the small Fort Zara. The teamsters had a military escort that had accompanied them to Council Grove, but the escort had returned to Fort Leavenworth, assuring the teamsters that the trail was safe due to recent treaties. The teamsters were left with only a few guns and their bullwhips to defend themselves against the attackers. During the fight, 10 teamsters were killed with arrows, and 2 were left for dead. One of those left alive was 14-year-old Robert McGee, who was shot twice and scalped while still alive. The other teamster, also left alive, died from his scalping days later. Troops from the fort tried to reach the teamsters, but the warriors were so numerous that the troops were ordered to return, as there was a real possibility they would all be killed. The warriors dumped the flour on the plains, burned the wagons, and ran off the livestock. One teamster, Albert Gentry, who was armed with a shotgun, escaped the carnage with a few others and reached the fort safely. One of the wagon masters who survived wrote to his wife after the attack. On the morning of the 18th, a short time before daybreak, Doc Brockman reported to me that there were 3 Indians at the herd. We immediately drove the herd in, hitched up, and rolled out, all in good hopes. But alas, what a sad reality awaited us. We traveled for a few miles near Walnut Creek, and behold, out came 120 Indians, dashing down the whole train in 5 minutes, and at one grand signal, the massacre commenced. Jack Redding was shot first, in the hip, I think. Not fatally. Ab Gentry was hit next, though not badly. I was in the lead, and running down to the boys, I ordered Ab to fire, which he did, and down came a chief and his horse. Ab, Jack, and Doc were near the center of the train. Doc Brockman's turn came now. He is badly wounded, yet I think not fatally. Weddell and Bird Edwards were killed immediately. All the Edwards were scalped and left on the field, for dead. 8 of Mr. Barrett's men were killed. The 9th and last cannot survive. Doc got on one of the ponies and got into the post, which was 1 or 2 miles off. They could not lend us any assistance, for Indians were thick in the rear of the post, and they only had 50 men. Last evening we committed 10 of our number to the silent tomb, and 5 are wounded out of 23. John Hiles was not with the train, being out after an ox, which in all probability saved him. Ab and I kept firing at them, which kept them in awe, so as to give Doc time to get into the post. This includes about all the casualties of our men. The Kiowa had over 100 warriors when they met the train from the front. The Indians were friendly, greeting the teamsters and asking for tobacco, which they received. After riding nearly the length of the train, the warriors opened fire on the teamsters with bows and arrows and firearms. Once the warriors left the area, the few troops at the fort sent out a detail to search for survivors. When they reached the scene of the massacre, they found that everyone had been scalped. The troops buried the dead in 2 graves and took Robert McGee and the other teamster back to the fort for medical attention. Once the skeletons were uncovered, the Kansas State Historical Society organized an archaeological dig to preserve the exposed remains. 8 of the skeletons were found to be white men, and 2 were black. The 10 men were identified from newspaper reports at the time as Oliver Beebe, Enos Beebe, age 16, James Lossell, age 23, Robert Lucas, age 22, Lewis Sampson, Talberto Edwards, Enos Gardner, William Weddell, age 35, and 2 African Americans known as Charles and Perry. Most of the skeletons had metal arrowheads among the bones. The majority of these arrowheads, or trade points, were traded or sold to the Indians at trading posts or by fur traders. However, 2 found with the skeletons were camp-made, given their slightly asymmetrical shape and handmade appearance. These 2 points are similar in style and construction to camp-made iron arrowheads recovered from a Kiowa camp in November 1864, which was attacked and destroyed by Kit Carson. A few buttons were also found in the graves. Historic accounts from the burial party say that most of the men had been stripped of their clothing, but the presence of the buttons indicates that at least some articles of clothing were left on the bodies when they were buried. Interestingly, no bullets were found around the bodies, and no footwear was found in the graves. The discovery of the graves in 1973 serves as a stark reminder of how closely we are connected to the turbulent and violent days of the frontier. Unearthed after more than a century of silence, these long-forgotten remains evoke a haunting sense of history, as though the past is only just beneath the surface, waiting to be revealed. The bones, exposed by the erosion of Walnut Creek, are not mere remnants of an ancient tragedy. They are a visceral link to the harsh realities of life in the American West, where survival was uncertain, and death often came swiftly and without warning. As the world around us continues to change, this discovery reminds us of the raw, untold stories that still lie buried beneath the land, waiting to tell their tale of conflict, bravery, and loss. It is a poignant testament cast by those violent years, which, though distant, will always be remembered and retold here at Wildwestfaces.